part of the Gulf Coast is starting to see impacts, as across the Atlantic, development chances are looking more likely. What is up, weather enthusiasts? I'm your host, Pat's Path Predictor. Let's get right into the weather. All right, so here's the situation we have for you, ladies and gentlemen. We have a little bit to get into. At this current point, we have our area of interest off the coast of Texas and Louisiana that we're going to be talking about. And then we're also going to be talking about conditions, once again, looking over what we have over the Atlantic in the latest. But there's also another shot that I've been looking at from the European of maybe some development, if it doesn't happen off the Gulf Coast, maybe happening off the Carolina coast and parts of the Atlantic Basin. So we're also going to be exploring that as well. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and dive right into it right here. Starting off, we have our area of interest. We're going to go ahead and read this out for you guys, and then we'll go ahead and get straight to the model. So here's the situation that we got. A trough of low pressure located over northeast Mexico continues to produce disorganized shower and thunderstorm activity. Development is not expected over the next day or so, while the trough remains inland and generally northward over the northeastern Mexico and southern Texas. This system is then forecasted to move northeast and could reemerge over the Gulf late Tuesday or Wednesday, while environmental conditions may support some development around midweek. Regardless of tropical cyclone formation, heavy rainfall, flash flooding, and gusty winds are possible across portions of eastern and southern Texas and Louisiana this week. Additional information can be found in products issued by your local NWS forecast office. They have now increased the 48-hour probabilities from 0 to 20%, and they've maintained the 7-day chance at 30%. So that's the latest that we have from the National Hurricane Center. So let's go ahead and go over some ensembles, and we'll go ahead and get it all set up for you guys. So starting off, we have our European ensembles. We're going to go ahead and pop this out and start about 24 hours out as we shift over to the North American view, and then we're going to go ahead and zoom in from there. So here's the situation that we got. We don't have too much going on for right now across parts of northeastern Mexico as the system starts to cross into Texas tonight, going into tomorrow. And then as we go to about 12 hours later, you start seeing more of these ensembles starting to pop up as it crosses into the Rio Grande River and moves into Texas right here, potentially causing some pretty significant flash flooding across the region. And if you're in the Rio Grande Valley, if you're in Brownsville, if you're in McAllen, if you're in Laredo, if you're in Corpus Christi, if you're anywhere in between, at least for a little while, you're going to want to pay attention to it. Same thing if you're in Houston, same thing if you're in Galveston, same thing if you're in Beaumont as well. You're going to want to take this pretty seriously because of the potential flash flooding threat. And then as we go ahead and move on to tomorrow night right here, this system is forecasted, according to the ensembles, to start moving either very close to or over the Gulf Coast of Texas over here as it shifts further to the east. And then as time continues to go on, we're going to 60 hours out. A lot of the European ensembles now are really having this just shift further to the east, because before there was a question of whether this is going to be inland or further out into the coast. And it looks like for right now, we've seen a dramatic shift further out into the coast over here, according to the ensemble. So that is a very big development right there. And if that continues to hold, then we might see a situation where some brief organization and some pretty brief development could take place over here while it stays over water. So that's something that we're going to want to watch out for. And then as we get to about 72 hours out from the 0Z run, this would be, I believe this would be Tuesday. This would be Wednesday night, I believe it would be. And it would be Wednesday night, excuse me. As we get to Wednesday night over here, you have a situation where you have a lot of power associated with these ensembles. You look at this, 988, 999, 994, 999, an outlier of 968, which I'm not 100% sure if I believe it, but 990s to low 1000s right here. Definitely a lot more power associated with these ensembles than what we've seen previously. Now, part of the reason that we're not seeing anything typically stronger than in these ensembles than maybe a tropical storm is because the system is still going to be somewhat broad. It's still going to be relatively large, and it's going to be interacting with a frontal boundary. So there are a few questions of if this is going to be fully tropical or not. We'll have to see how it goes as we get into later parts of this week, but definitely something to take kind of seriously as we continue to progress. And as we go ahead and go to, I believe this, yeah, as we go ahead and go to Wednesday morning it'll be Thursday morning rather, we start seeing the system kind of moving inland, moving through parts of eastern Texas into Louisiana. A lot of the power numbers are definitely there for this for sure. My main guess is if this system does develop, it looks to me that it might be a tropical storm at the absolute strongest. And the primary reason for that is because if it goes over water, which based on these models, it's more likely it will than it won't. It's only going to have about 48 hours or so over water before it moves into inland into either Texas or Louisiana. So that's the primary reason, and we haven't even gotten to the conditions yet, which let's go ahead and start going over right now. Let's go ahead and pull this up for right here. Here is our North Atlantic, or at least the Western Atlantic basin right here. What I want to pull up here right here is our wind shear map to go, okay, what exactly are we looking at? Because we're going to see tropical development at some point during this. You have the system organizing and consolidating, but what is the wind shear going to look like? And at least for right now, it isn't necessarily terrible, but you do see a massive bulk of shear in much to the north in parts of the continental United States, going from all the way into the Midwest down to central Texas over here. Question is, will that stay inland or will it move further to the coast a little bit? That's the main question we have right here. Although about 48 hours out, you're definitely noticing a bit of a wind shear pocket starting to emerge. Look at this. You're definitely noticing more of a pocket now than you were yesterday. Definitely taking that into account. You're looking at that shear over here and down here off the coast of Mexico. You're definitely seeing a little bit more breathing room as the system is forecast to make landfall, at least according to the European, near the Houston area, as a matter of fact. So we're going to want to pay attention to that going forward. But ultimately, you still have a bit of shear to battle with. You still have this bit of a jet streak that you're going to be dealing with as the system moves further to the east. So you're going to want to pay attention to that going forward. But also taking a quick gander at the dry air aspect of this, or the dry air aspect, I will say it's definitely not as big of a wild card as I thought it would be. You're definitely in a bit of a moisture pocket right here. You do have some dry air further to the west over here that might maybe cause some issues with it. But as long as the system continues to produce convection, and as long as that frontal boundary continues to produce the convection it has been, then you're not going to see too big of an issue until about, I'd say about, this is, I believe, this is Tuesday morning. I would say by the time we get to Tuesday night or Wednesday morning, that's when I would start becoming a bit of a problem. But you still have this moisture pocket over here in parts of Texas and Louisiana that you're going to want to pay attention to. So that's something that we're paying attention to. So I know I keep repeating myself, but ultimately that's what we're watching, and we'll definitely keep you updated as more data and information comes out. But after we get past this part where it hits Texas and Louisiana, things do get a little interesting here, and that's why we're going to go ahead and shift back to our ensembles. So here's the situation. We're going to zoom out. We're going to go ahead and go to the North Atlantic basin right here, and we're going to go ahead and pretty much do one. Actually, hold on. What I want to do is, okay, that's not exactly what I want to do. Let's go ahead and do that. Perfect. That's a lot that's a little better. And after this system moves through Texas and Louisiana, let's go ahead and go to about 96 hours out. So this will be for Thursday night. You have the system trekking through the deep south, through Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and then as it emerges through the Georgia and the Carolinas, you do see a situation where things get a little interesting on the tropic side. You could see some potential tropical development occurring off the Carolina coast and right here. Let's go ahead and take a quick gander at this 12 hours out. here's what we got. We're seeing a lot of these ensembles picking up on it. A lot of these ensembles are moving out into the Atlantic Basin over here, mainly off North Carolina, moving into the Gulf Stream and kind of potentially re-intensifying as it emerges over there. If it does do anything out there, then it's most likely once again going to be a tropical storm, mainly because of the shear that might be in that region. Let's go ahead and take a gander at this. Yeah, it's still a pretty widespread, but you're definitely seeing how many ensembles is this by the time all of them emerge off the water. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. About, I'd say, a 10 or 11 of the 30 European ensembles. So definitely a good percentage of them are wanting some sort of tropical development to happen off the Atlantic Ocean, in the Atlantic Ocean. Now, is some of it going to be subtropical, or is it going to be mid-latitude, or is it going to be tropical? We're not 100% sure about that, but we'll have to keep an eye on it, especially as it comes off the Carolina coast, because it's definitely a signal that I've definitely been watching and has picked up some traction over the last few days. And just for my own curiosity, what's the operational looking like? Taking a quick gander at your operational run, let's go ahead and take a quick look. You have the low pressure system moving through parts of the deep south right here, and then it emerges off the coast of North Carolina right here, and it emerges off of there, and it definitely is around the 990s in terms of its low pressure system right here. The one thing I'm curious about is this going to be frontally attached, or is it going to be warm cored? And it's definitely an interesting thing to note, and definitely an interesting thing to pay attention to as well. Looking at this, it does look like maybe some frontal. There is some frontal influence with this, but it does look a semi-warm core as well. Definitely going to want to pay attention to it. I wouldn't necessarily be surprised if we get a subtropical storm if the operational run holds from this, but just for my curiosity, what's the wind shear looking like right here? Okay, the wind shear isn't necessarily looking the worst. It's just going to be mainly on the western side, but the shear ahead of it definitely is a little bit lower than what I actually originally expected. So, yeah, it's definitely a possibility we see some tropical or subtropical development. The main question is, when it emerges off the coast of North Carolina, is it going to have fronts attached to it, or is it going to remain mostly warm core and mostly tropical? That's the main thing that I'm a bit skeptical about, mainly because it's interacting with that frontal boundary in the next couple of days. We're going to want to pay attention to it. We're going to want to monitor it. Regardless, though, if you're tuning in from Texas, if you're tuning in from Louisiana, Mississippi, Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia, and the Carolinas, you're going to want to take this kind of seriously, because regardless of development, you still could see some pretty significant impacts from this, in my opinion. You're going to want to take it kind of seriously. You're going to want to start making some preparations, whether it's for flash flooding or not, because that to me is the main threat from this. And we're going to want to take this kind of seriously. So with that being said, and kind of analyzing that threat a little bit more, I do want to go ahead and pivot once again to other areas in the Atlantic, because we've been talking about this the last couple of days. What are the conditions going to be looking like? Because in my opinion, I've been looking at it, and over the last couple of days, it appeared that I'd say late June, there might have been more of an opening than we previously thought for some more tropical development. And I want to go ahead and explore that a little bit more. Let's go ahead and shift over here to parts of the Atlantic according to the European. What I want to look at is the shear and the dry air aspect of it, but I also want to later show some water temperatures for you guys and kind of emphasize what we might be looking at in the long term. So let's go ahead and take a quick gander at our shear for you guys, right here. So here's the wind shear that we have across much of the Atlantic. We kind of covered the shear over parts of the Gulf region. We didn't talk too much about the Caribbean, but you're definitely noticing the shear pattern, at least over here, is definitely more of a wild card and more of your up, down, up, down, up, down type of variability. This is mainly because you still have these troughs and ridges emerging off the United States. Severe weather season still going on. But as we start to get to around early July, that's when it starts to taper off, and that's when the jet starts to move into parts of Canada, and that's when it becomes less of a hazard and less of a factor in parts of the Gulf and in the Caribbean. Now, the Eastern Caribbean has that classic classic graveyard setup right here. The Caribbean graveyard, as it's nicknamed, mainly because of how much shear there is, especially throughout parts of June. Although throughout late June, I've noticed the pattern typically break a little bit. We've seen that in 2022 with Bonnie, 2023 with Brett, 2024 with Beryl. I know that was the one big hurricane that we had. We didn't see that too much in 2025. But in 2026, let's see how we're going to be looking at this going forward. You definitely are noticing more of a trough ridge pattern instead of a zonal pattern with the wind shear. What that essentially means is a trough ridge pattern is kind of your wavy up-down pattern that you typically see, whereas whereas a zonal pattern is more flat and it's more even in terms of its latitude. So that's just kind of a best way of describing it right there. Those are more meteorological technical terms. I'm sure a lot of you don't quite get right here, but I do throw them around a little bit just to kind of explain what they are, and I hope you learned something out of this. But anyway, that's what we're looking at this current point, but this is what we got for June 21st. You're definitely noticing the shear across the eastern Atlantic in general really starting to tank a little bit. There's a break in the shear. Also noticing as well a huge ridge across parts of the Atlantic and a trough following that in parts of the subtropics. So definitely something to pay attention to. For sure. Definitely seeing also a upper level low producing some shear further north into parts of the parts of the subtropics. I stammered for a second. And that's going to be definitely interesting for another factor that I'm watching out for because of where this flow is going to end up going. But by and large, it's definitely a situation we're going to want to pay attention to, mainly because this could potentially impact the Sahara dust over the next couple of weeks. Going forward. And as we get to late June, you're definitely noticing that shear kind of retreating a little bit further up to the north. You're definitely noticing more breaks in the shear in the main development region. In the Caribbean, it kind of goes up and down, up and down, up and down. But you're definitely noticing more of a kind of a shift in terms of the shear where it's kind of going back and forth, instead of this consistent block of shear that we typically see in parts of the Caribbean around this time of the year. So I am paying attention to that. Let's go ahead and take a quick gander at the dry air, given what I'm seeing with this upper level low. Here's what our relative humidity looks like. So still very dry across the Atlantic, across parts of the Caribbean as well. Sahara air layer still exists for quite a while, but you do start seeing this low pressure system starting to get its act together, and it kind of holds off some of the worst impacts for the Sahara dust for a little while, as you're seeing more of a moisture surge impacting parts of the Atlantic. Definitely paying attention to that in the long term to see how that goes. But at least for about a week or so in late June, you definitely are seeing less Sahara dust than what you would normally see in the deep tropics over here, while seeing it a bit more concentrated over Africa, parts of Europe, and in the subtropical Atlantic. So definitely something we're going to want to pay attention to moving forward. And even as this low pressure system moves further up to the north, it's picking up a pretty significant amount of dry air and dust with it. So that's going to be an intriguing situation until this high pressure system starts to take over and bring more of the dry air throughout the Atlantic. Just for my own curiosity, what's the precipitable water anomalies? Definitely a bit of an increase, and it kind of reflects what that upper level low is doing. You're not seeing as much dry air, at least compared to the climatological mean from 1991 to 2020 across much of the deep tropics. These are considerably moist anomalies right here that we're paying attention to. So we have a more moisture to work with this year than we've seen last year or 2020. I wouldn't say 2024 around this time because that's when Beryl happened. So that's kind of a bad example, but at least in years past. But ultimately, it's a situation that, at least for right now, we're going to want to watch. And as we get to about a week out or so, it still holds for quite some time. You see a bit more mixing going on across parts of the Atlantic right here. Although by the time we get to about 2 weeks out, as that high pressure system starts to take over once again, you see some more dust and some more dry air anomalies moving through here once again. So it's going to be a bit of a process right here. The situation is going to evolve. And we're going to continue to keep you updated with everything here on the Pat's Path Predictor channel. But with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go ahead and close the video out right here. I really hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you are new. The goal, as always, is to get more people engaged with weather. If you'd like to help out, hang out, or ask us questions, feel free to join the Storms Unite Discord server. The link to that is in the end screen. And with that being said, have a wonderful day, guys. Stay safe.